a bill on pet abduction. And I call on Carolyn Thomas to move the motion.
Thank you. Pets are part of the family. They help grow love and compassion. They combat loneliness and mental health issues and keep us healthy and active. Pets are not inanimate objects like a stolen wallet or a laptop, but sentient beings capable of experiencing emotional trauma. The Pet Abduction 2024 Act came into force in England and Northern Ireland last August, and it was thanks to a private member's bill from Anna Firth MP. And similar legislation is being followed now, being put forward in Scotland. If we do not follow suit, Wales is in danger of being left behind. The Act makes it a specific criminal offence to steal a cat or dog, and those convicted could face up to 5 years in prison. The Act also recognises that pets are legal subjects that can be victims of crime and not simply a piece of property. The existing 1968 Theft Act we currently rely on in Wales is not strong enough. It's not a strong enough deterrent. It fails to acknowledge that animals are sentient beings capable of experiencing emotional trauma and suffering. It does not consider the unique distress caused to an owner when a pet is stolen, and the horror of knowing your beloved family member is at the hands of criminals. This trauma cannot be compared to losing a phone or a wallet. Over the years, there have been so many instances of pet theft that I know of personally. Dogs tend to be the most commonly stolen pets, and very sadly, only 16% are eventually returned to their owner. A local resident told me how when his daughter was out walking with their beloved spaniel, a van stopped and someone got out and started talking to asking for directions. As he was doing so, he bent down and he was trying to undo the lead to try and take the dog, basically. She screamed and shouted for her dad, who was following behind, and the man ran away. Another resident told me in a farm how a van pulled into a farmyard and took the dog in front of their eyes. They didn't have CCTV to see the van. The dog was never found, and the children had to live with that distress, feeling of losing their family pet. It was never found again. It's experiences like these that led Eileen Jones to submit a petition to the Senedd Petitions Committee called Make Pet Abduction a Specific Criminal Offence in Wales. The text of the petition says, Wales has chosen not to introduce a pet abduction offence. Stolen dogs and cats will continue to be low priority as property theft in Wales. If caught, the sentence will be generally a small fine or a suspended sentence. With the introduction of more specific penalties in England and Northern Ireland, pets in Wales risk becoming greater targets for thieves. We must offer our pets and their families the same level of security as other pets in the UK. The response we had from Welsh Government is that they are working to provide education to help owners protect their animals, such as microchipping, making sure that they're not left unattended in gardens. These are common sense things that people do anyway, but it doesn't stop the despicable behaviour of intruders into people's homes and gardens and thieves on the street that try and steal dogs on the street. The RSPCA were told by North Wales Police that, unfortunately, dog theft is not a specific offence on our crime recording system. If pet abduction was given its own category in Wales, as it does now in England and Ireland under the Pet Abduction Act, police forces would be required to keep an accurate record. This would help in determining the scale of pet theft and where the activity is most common. It would empower police forces to take appropriate action. Having specific legislation in place would act as a greater deterrent for criminals and prevent Wales from becoming a target for pet thieves due to differences in legislation across the border. Dogs are being stolen for breeding in puppy farms to be sold for profit, to be used as bait for dog fighting rings and kidnapped so that criminals can demand ransoms for their owners. The instances of cat theft has quadrupled since 2015, and Cats Protection believes legislation is desperately needed to curb this increase, fuelled by the rising price of kittens. I'm told that Welsh Government chose not to apply the Pet Abduction Act as it's prioritising the existing animal welfare commitments, such as the Animal Welfare Establishments and Exhibits Bill. And I understand the pressure the very small team are under, and I'm so pleased that they're taking forward that bill and the work that they are doing, and it will help thousands of animals. If the previous UK government had not chosen to withdraw the Animal Welfare Kept Animals Bill in 2021, leading then to the Private Members Bill, maybe resources would have been okay, because this would have all been taken forward together, maybe as an LCM. But the fact remains that something needs to be done. A neighbour's dog went out of the door when she was just getting the shopping in. She left the door ajar, and she looked and the dog wasn't there. So she looked at the road, couldn't find it anywhere. The whole family then became involved. They were driving around, couldn't see it anywhere, checked the footpaths, everything. Posters then appeared everywhere, Facebook. It carried on for weeks. It carried on for months. Posters, false sightings. Eventually, 6 months later, an RSPCA officer got in touch. He scanned, a dog was found on the streets 30 miles away. He scanned the dog, and there was a microchip. The dog's about 89 years old. Luckily, she'd microchipped it a year earlier because she was a little bit concerned, which is, it's the right thing to do. So the family went to collect him, but he was a changed dog. He was traumatised by his experiences, and he was nervous of the male owner. He was a changed dog, and it was believed that he'd probably been used for breeding. And the family were traumatised. The dog never got over the trauma. So I would hope, that we can bring through this legislation and have the support of the Senedd to introduce a specific pet abduction offence as a private member's bill, to bring it forward in line with other UK nations. Thank you, and I look forward to other contributions.
Carolyn Thomas.
Thank you, Carolyn, for bringing this to our chamber. It's so important. Currently, pet theft in Wales is treated as a property crime under the Theft Act 1968, and that equates a stolen pet, a stolen member of your family, to inanimate objects like a bicycle or something else of material value. However, for many, and indeed myself, pets are family members and very beloved. Indeed, my own dog, Alfie, if ever when I'm down here and I phone my husband, the first thing I ask is, how is Alfie? He's 9 years old, entered the Senedd Dog of the Year. But seriously, in all honesty, we know that one day the time will come when we lose him. But I don't know how I would cope if Alfie was stolen. We know, too, that these abductions, thefts, criminal activity sees these defenceless and often these defenceless pets become bait for fighting dogs in fighting rings, sold on, exported, and sometimes they then get left abandoned. Sadly, in 23 alone, there were an estimated 2,300 dog thefts in England and Wales, with a 170% surge during the pandemic. Yet, only 16% of stolen dogs are reunited with their owners, highlighting the emotional and financial incentives for criminals. Now, we have, and I will say this for Facebook, we have an organisation, I know that a lady called Rachel Roberts and Joe Nuttall are involved with, if a dog goes missing, they'll even use drones to go out looking, and sometimes we get successful results. I'd like to thank those two mentioned for the work they do. Existing laws do fail to recognise a deep bond between pets and their owners, particularly for the elderly and those living alone. I've known of people breaking in cars to get pet dogs. Pet theft causes immense distress, yet current penalties do not reflect the severity of the crime. England has taken action with the Pet Abduction Act, recognising pets, dogs, cats, anything, guinea pigs, anything, as sentient beings, and they ensure stronger legal protections. Wales, though, despite previous commitments to animal welfare, has not yet legislated on this issue due to resource constraints. It's not good enough. A beloved family pet should not be valued less in Wales than in other parts of the UK. As animal welfare is devolved, Wales now has the opportunity and responsibility to strengthen the protections. People with mental health issues quite often rely on their pet as their companion, their soulmate. So it's really important that this is looked at and looked at urgently. Between 2019 and 23, 416 dog thefts were reported in Wales, but with this inconsistent police recording and unreported cases, the real figure is likely to be more. A specific pet abduction offence would help to track cases, disrupt criminal networks and prevent Wales from becoming a target for offenders. Recognising pets as sentient beings rather than a material item is crucial. Now, I will say...
You need to conclude now, Joanna, please.
Yeah, there was a dog tied up outside the local Sainsbury's here, and I would urge any pet owner, dog owner in particular, do not leave your pets where you are asking for trouble, because this dog was ever so friendly, and I probably, if I'd have wanted to, he would have come with me. And it just made me realise that I needed to be stronger on this debate today. Enacting pet...
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah. The Welsh Government need to get on with this now, and they need to legislate against pet abduction. Diolch.
Mr Bowen.
Can I say from the outset that I appreciate the emotional harm created by pet theft, and I know the bond people have with their pet, but I am against this bill. The first question we need to ask is the current law adequate? In the current theft guidelines, harm is not only assessed by monetary value, it's also assessed by the harm caused, and that includes emotional distress. The starting point under the current theft guidelines is 2 years imprisonment, going up to 3.5 years, with a maximum sentence of 7 years. It's worth noting that the Act in Westminster, passed last year, has a maximum sentence of only 5 years, 2 years lower than the Theft Act. Yes.
Apparently, only Crown Court can deliver sentences in excess of 6 months. For a case of theft to be heard before the Crown Court, it either has to be a secondary offence, so tagged onto burglary, or major offences of a value of over £100,000. Most pets are worth £500. And I'd just like to say, in 2018, a gang of 4 were tried at a Crown Court following burglary. 15 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels were taken, including one which was pregnant. One of the dogs was later recovered on the side of a motorway, having been thrown there. All 4 are pleaded guilty to theft. But despite this being a very serious case, in the highest possible court, the gang members still only received suspended sentences. They do not get convicted.
We can all find examples of what someone would consider a lenient sentence, but it's not correct in saying that theft cannot be dealt in the Crown Court. It's an either way offence, and it can be less than £100,000 if emotional distress is shown, and I think that would easily show if a pet is stolen. So the first question is the current law adequate? If you don't believe, you think that something has to be done, the next question to ask is, what's the most effective way? Now, the sentencing guidelines can easily be amended. In 2024, the fraud guidelines were amended to include the recognition of the impact on the victims of fraud when the monetary value was very low indeed. Now, this can easily be done with theft, that the distress of pets and the owners to be explicitly taken into account. Now, and if the Sentencing Council needs persuasion, under the Section 124 of the Coroners and Justice Act 2009, the Lord Chancellor has the power to tell the Sentencing Council that they need to look again at the guidelines. And in the spirit of devolution, I'm sure the same would also apply to the Council General, and would ask the Welsh Government to consider using that right to ask the Council to amend the guideline. It would be far more effective than passing primary legislation. Now, does the Westminster Pet Abduction Act address the alleged issue? That's the third question. Well, it doesn't, because welfare or suffering of the pet is not included in the Act at all. The Act does nothing explicit to increase sentences. As I've already mentioned, the maximum sentence is 2 years lower than the Theft Act. So there's no guarantee that this will lead to increased sentences. Final question. I agree with the Welsh Government. Should other matters be prioritised? We've only passed 60 primary legislation in this place since 2011. The lack of resources and tight timetables are a real issue. We have devolution for an issue. We don't have to follow blindly what England does. This was an unnecessary piece of legislation, and it can be easy, and the current law can easily be amended to deal with the concerns raised. Diolch yn fawr.
Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Dipper Llawydd. First of all, I want to thank my fellow member, Carolyn, for bringing this important issue to the Chamber today. And unlike the previous speaker, I fully support her legislative proposal to make pet abduction a specific criminal offence. And it does bring it in line with England, and it isn't, as the previous speaker said, just following blindly where others have gone before. Evidence shows that pets are often stolen to order according to the latest fashion, and there was plenty of evidence of this, with specific breeds being sought, particularly through the pandemic, and people taking them for walks and finding they had suddenly gone missing, and it leaves behind devastated children and owners. And then, of course, the other side of that is the unsuspecting buyer who thinks they've bought a puppy, they usually are puppies, quite legitimately, only to find that it was stolen. So I think that in itself speaks to what happens here. These aren't people just suddenly deciding, of course, that they're going to steal a pet. These are people who are aligned to criminal gangs. They're making an awful lot of money in many cases. And, of course, we all know that if you make an awful lot of money illegally, then you have to somehow launder that money. And where does that money actually end up? So I think there are much wider complications than those that have just been mentioned, and those, of course, are hugely important. And why should we have legislation? I'd answer perhaps the previous speaker, because if people know they're going to be prosecuted, they think again. If they think that the existing legislation may have some teeth and some people may implement it, they will take perhaps a greater chance in activating the crime. So, and of course we all know that pets are so much more than property. And you did allude to that, of course you did. But they shouldn't be, whatever we think, in the same class as household items. And I agree with everybody who's already said that today. And I do think, you know, that we had an opportunity, we could have done this. In my view, we should have done this, because cats and dogs, for some people, particularly we had an earlier debate about people who are lonely. It is the only company they have. And so it covers so many aspects of so many people's lives across all communities and cultures that I asked Cabinet Secretary whether the Welsh Government will support bringing forward this incredibly important piece of legislation, and I thank Carolyn and also the petitioner for bringing it to our attention.
And I call on the Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Climate Change and Rural Affairs, Hugh Davis. Thank you very much, and thank you, Carolyn, too, for introducing this important debate. I think also Janet, Rhys and Joyce, who have spoken in this debate. Now, I understand that pet abduction is very concerning, causes a great deal of distress. Pets aren't objects, but they are beloved members of the family. I am very aware of the concern that people feel when a pet is abducted.
As has been mentioned already in this debate, the theft of a pet is a criminal offence already, and the Non-Devolved Theft Act 1968, and the maximum penalty is indeed 7 years imprisonment. There are issues, I think, around sentencing guidelines and so on in the approach, but that is where the law currently is. Now, officials across the UK have been considering carefully how they can tackle pet theft. In addition to ensuring criminals are brought to justice, we have also done a lot to raise awareness about how potential buyers should be able to spot suspicious pet sellers. There are some obvious things and some less obvious, and we've been doing an immense amount of work in this area. And Carolyn, as you said, our priorities for animal welfare are set out in our Animal Welfare Plan for Wales, which focuses on some areas where there are real significant benefits for animal welfare, including with cats and dogs, and also with licensed establishments and so on. We really need to deliver on that. It includes a timetable for the delivery of the Animal Welfare Programme for government commitments and the other animal welfare priorities. We've got real work to get on with here, and I know that's supported by Senedd members here. So legislation on pet abduction is not included as a priority at this time, given the legal protections are in place. But I do take the point, we could look at issues of sentencing guidelines and so on and so forth. However, there is a range of other work taking place on this very topic. So, we're working in partnership with the UK and the Scottish governments on improvements to microchipping and registration. We know we need to do this. I was there when that was brought in originally at the other end at the M4, in order to make it easier and more regular to reunite animals, pets, with their owners. Yes, indeed, Carolyn.
That's a really important issue. That dog would not be returned to my neighbour without being microchipped.
Yeah.
But we need to have a single point of register or a single register. That's another issue.
Indeed, yeah.
So
entirely. And we spot. Yeah. I mean, this is it's a UK matter, but I think we can express a view in the Senedd. The multiplicity of databases and registrable points causes some problems for actually identifying and linking up with the owner. And those are really practical things that we can work on. And our worked approach there with on responsible dog ownership and breeding includes looking at how we can educate pet owners to help them protect their animals, keep their pets very safe. For example, really straightforward, making sure that microchipping is up to date and current. Too many people are letting their chips go out of date or not updating them when they move, or the pet is given to a friend or a sibling and so on. So keeping those up to date, but also not tying pets up outside shops. How often do we see that happening? Not leaving them unattended in unsecure gardens. And not letting pets roam out of sight when out walking. All of these things really matter. My officials will monitor the ongoing situation of dog theft and the reporting of incidents and the enforcing of existing legislation with local authorities and with the police. But just to add to that, we've also held 2 very successful multi-agency summits on responsible dog breeding and ownership with all of the stakeholders involved. The latest was in October. In addition to these summits, there are also a number of smaller focused working groups working with local authorities, with police and third sector representatives, which are delivering benefits in a number of areas. And one of the things that is being looked at is indeed that issue of returning pets that are microchipped to their owners, and we're making great ground in that. Indeed, I issued a written statement on the 5th of November setting out the successes of this multi-agency approach to responsible dog ownership and breeding. But our focus is indeed to understand and to take action on areas that aim to make the biggest difference right now for the greatest number of animals right across Wales. So on that basis, after very careful consideration, it was decided to prioritise our resources to the existing commitments set out in that 5-year animal welfare plan. But the Welsh Government, Carolyn, does still retain the right to legislate on this area in future, should this be necessary. But at present, these really ambitious plans for animal welfare in Wales have to take our precedence. We will continue with a broad range of non-legislative work as well relating to pet abduction. Felly, often ddiolch.
So I'd like to thank Carolyn Thomas once again for bringing this issue to the fore. I want to assure you that I will give further consideration to a potential bill in Wales if the evidence were to support it.
And Carolyn Thomas.
And I call on Carolyn Thomas to reply to the debate.
I understand that the government is busy with legislation, but a lot of the work has already been done, and this will align Welsh law with existing measures in England and Northern Ireland, and I would like to help with this, providing evidence to help your officers to bring this forward. The existing 1968 Theft Act fails to reflect the emotional impact on pet owners when their pets are stolen, and the fact that animals are sentient beings and not inanimate objects, as was mentioned by everybody. The Pet Abduction Act requires police forces to record pet theft as a distinct category of crime, rather than just under the theft of property, by recording it as a specific crime. In 2019, Finn's Law recognised that service animals such as police dogs deserved recognition and protection beyond that of property, beyond that of police vehicles that get damaged. Animals, horses are different, and I believe we should firmly extend that distinction to our pets as well. The Pet Abduction Act has the support of leading experts in the animal welfare sector, including the RSPCA, Blue Cross, Cats Protection and Dogs Trust. I don't accept what Rhys Owen said. Evidence shows that dog theft is not taken seriously in court of law. Not at all. We've got evidence to show that. And it's not properly recorded on police systems. So I disagree totally. So I hope that members will support this motion today and join me in sending a firm message that pets are not simply property. They are members of our family. Thank you.